Welcome to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast, hosted by Don Tura, CEO and President of SIG.
Well, folks, welcome back to the podcast series. I am excited. I have a new friend that I'm bringing into the studio today. His name is Julio Peironcely, and he is the Global Director of Insights and Analytics Cycles and Procurement at Danone. And Julio, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about what your company does, and we're going to dive really deep into AI. But let me tell the audience a little bit about who you are. So Julio leads teams specialized in data science, advanced data analytics, artificial intelligence, business intelligence, and digital procurement. Julio received his PhD from Leiden University for his research in computational life sciences. And after graduating, he worked as a data science consultant at Deloitte and Microsoft. He is the founder of Data Fitter, a data and AI boutique agency. And he's also served as the head of data science teams at hopefully I can pronounce this, Schiphol Amsterdam Airport, and as a lead data scientist at Vodafone Ziggo. So how much of that did I just completely destroy in your introduction, Julio?
You nailed it, Don. You did it very well, and thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to dive into this topic. But before we get started, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor and AI council partner, Zycus. When we return, we're going to hear from our guest.
Your buyers are bogged down by tactical buying. What if you were freed up from tactical PO processing to focus on more strategic work? What if you could flip requisitions to purchase orders with just one click? What if tactical buying were to become touchless? What if cost management, compliance, checks, and controls didn't mean complicated and time-consuming? Introducing Merlin for e-procurement. Now with Merlin, you can focus on what matters. You can strengthen supplier relations. You can mitigate risks. You can contribute to strategic initiatives like new product development to support sustainable growth. Merlin is changing the future of procurement. Let's see the future live in action. Zycus AI-enabled Buyer Smart Desk automatically processes all non-catalog requisition to PO by using out-of-the-box intelligence to thoroughly review the requisition by matching extracted information from documents and data patterns from past purchases. Zycus AI-enabled autonomous Quick Source AI automatically flips requisitions into a Quick Source event, autonomously invites recommended supplier into the event, autonomously sends out email communication inviting the suppliers. The supplier can then respond to the email just like how they will respond to any email. AI then automatically extracts the information from the quote attached to the email. AI ranks suppliers based on bid analysis, making it ready for the buyers to flip back into the requisition. Hello, CPOs. Your buyers are meant for more. They deserve Merlin for e-procurement.
So Julio, welcome back. So I would like to just talk a little bit about you, because I have to tell you, I'm a huge fan. Just hearing PhD data scientist, that is something that I think is just phenomenal, and we need more people like you. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm originally, I was born in Spain. I studied computer science there, and I decided to apply computer science into new fields. So I was interested in biology, and therefore I did bioinformatics, data science applied for biology, and research in chemistry. I graduated, I did my PhD there in the Netherlands, and I still like the use of these computational techniques, algorithms, machine learning, to understand problems, to try to get answers to questions. And I decided to apply it in a business setting, right? That's why I went into industry and applied data science in Deloitte and Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And I really like that. And I liked also to lead teams, to grow young talent. So that has been a bit my transition from practitioner into data science, doing machine learning, into leading teams that do this work. And for the last 2 years and a half, I've been working at Danone in procurement, helping them set up their analytics capabilities, digital capabilities, specific in procurement. We've undergone a transformation in our operating model, but also in our backbone, in our processes, and I take care of the analytics side of it.
Interesting. So I have a book called Data Scientists for Dummies. Honest to God, the reason I'm such a big fan of yours is I can barely get through the first chapter, and I'm a math major from university. So the ability to take all of this big data and to be able to create algorithms to be able to glean insights is such, I mean, this is so futuristic, and yet it's here today. And I have to tell you, Zycus has been talking about AI for years and years, and well before the time that it became mainstream. So tell me, well, first off, tell people what is Danone, and then I'd like to get into a little bit about how you use AI to drive insights.
Yes, so Danone is a leading dairy company. It's a global company. We started originally making yogurts, and over the years we have grown into be also leading enterprise in plant-based products. So we're very strong in plant-based, in dairy products, also in specialized nutrition. So early life nutrition for baby formula for infants or for people with special dietary needs. And the third pillar is our water business. So we have prestigious brands like Evian and Volvic in water.
Oh.
So these are our three divisions. And yeah, we're a leading dairy and FMCG company.
Interesting. So, you know, we talked about big data for years and years, and we talked about the computational capabilities that were driving big data, and everyone talked about it, but no one knew what we were going to be able to do with all of this data that we were accumulating. So can you talk about the focus and how you use AI within Danone?
So I will focus on the part of procurement. At Danone as a whole, for instance, we are also investing heavily in technology, in data and AI, right? So we're building a central data platform, state of the art, and all the functions can use it, right? If you zoom in procurement, what we have done is we have digitalized the backbone. So thanks to Zycus, we have digitalized our source to pay backbone. And the nice thing of doing this is by having digital tools running this, it generates data, right? It's software generates data, and then you can analyze that data to find insights, but you can also use it to predict what can happen, right? To anticipate events, to understand trends, right? So these are things we're trying to do. For instance, we're trying to understand our spend. So we have a program on spend analytics. It's not only to bring, what we're trying to do on one end is turn on the lights on the spend, right? To classify, to understand it, because this is a typical problem on procurement, right? But we don't want to stop there. So what we're trying now, we're researching is, can we find trends in how we purchase so we can predict the spend, and perhaps we could anticipate certain spend volumes of such, like if we can predict spend, we can anticipate bonuses, rebates. We could see if we have some of balance sheet commitments we can account for. These are things we're trying on spend. But if we go back to the backbone, all this software generating the data, it tells you how people use the tool, right? And adding this AI and big data layer on top can really take the burden of a lot of operational work, right? So while before you needed to have a lot of people controlling activities, now you can have an algorithm supporting them, telling them there's a lot of things going on in your procurement operations, but you should focus on here, because here is what's at risk. Like we might have some, I don't know, some invoices that might not get paid, or we have some, we anticipate problems with suppliers that cannot deliver. So we help procurement experts to focus on what's really important, right? This is one of the ways we use AI and big data.
So you said predict, forecast. And so, you know, for years when I was in procurement, you know, we would say we had a forecast, and literally people would laugh at us. It was sort of, well, based on last year and based on the economy, we think it's going to be this. Do you think you are actually close to being able to actually predict spend in certain areas now with the use of AI?
It's tricky, right? So we try to use it in different areas, like we buy commodities, a lot of agricultural commodities. So you try to forecast prices or what could happen. And it's very hard. It's very hard to forecast markets. But in other areas, for instance, in spend, well, what you're trying to find is pattern in the behavior of buyers, for instance, and also the seasons of the business, right? And of course, you're not going to predict what you're going to do with your spend with high accuracy, but it gives you some hints what might happen, right? So you already see trends that at the closing of a quarter, there's higher spend, or at the closing of the year is higher spend, or these things you can anticipate a bit, right? And you don't need to nail it, but just giving directionality in what might happen, it already helps a lot our buyers and our procurement experts. So it's more like supporting than taking it as is the absolute truth.
So when you're designing algorithms that are being used as the AI engine, can you just sort of tell the audience, because I haven't had a data scientist on that really focused on procurement before. So can you tell me a little bit about what is an algorithm, what goes into it, what do you consider? I just think people would love to hear the sort of the nitty gritty.
Yeah, so it all starts with business knowledge, right? So the business expert talks to the data expert and expresses his understanding of what might happen. So would say, okay, I believe drought and feed prices affect the prices of commodities in dairy commodities, let's say. Mm-hmm. What you need to do is collect historical data of feed prices and drought and production volumes and demand volumes and the prices of those commodities and see if there are some correlations, right? In a simple way, you could look at correlations. At the end, you have a lot of things that could affect the price, but what you're trying to find is those that actually carry signal and remove those that are just noise. And you can start with simple variance and correlation analysis, or going to finding really more complex patterns. But you could look at it like that. An expert says, I think this has an effect on that. And by looking at historical data, you see if there's some connection.
Interesting. So I just have to delve into, because I'm so curious about this. With the pandemic, did you have to throw out your algorithms, rework them based on, what was happening around the world? How did that impact something like the work that you do?
It impacts quite a lot, right? Because if you look historically, what might affect on prices? Well, we're not accounting on a pandemic, right? So when a pandemic hits, it's like a new confounding factor, and you need to see, okay, I did not account for this, so my outcomes, my predictions are going to be wrong because I did not account for it, right? So these kind of events really disrupt what your predictions, and that's just the reality, right? So a bit how we're also trying to mitigate is, imagine if your forecasts are not correct anymore, your predictions are not correct anymore, what can you do? Well, what we're trying to do is equip with insights of the current situation, so the experts can decide what's best to do, right? So instead of saying, well, I think I will predict the price of this, or I will predict a risk that a supplier cannot deliver the stock I need. If I cannot trust that, at least I can provide as many insights based on data of the current situation, what our factory is doing, what kind of stock levels we have, how much purchase orders are confirmed. So at least you know the current situation, and you're working with close to real-time information, right? And at least then you can use your judgment and your ingenuity and your business acumen to decide what's best. So we try to also equip our people like that, so in the cases they cannot trust the algorithm.
So, you're dealing with it, sort of inputs and outputs from two different directions, because you're using AI to predict the marketplace from where you buy, but are you also using AI to predict how much you're going to sell within the organization?
Of course, we do forecasting on sales to try to accommodate, right? So we need to say, okay, how much do we think we're gonna need to sell in each country. So we prepare our production for that we do, and most of the companies do.
Okay, interesting. So when you talk about AI in the future, how do you see it becoming more impactful, let's say over the 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? Do you think it's gaining momentum within the procurement organizations?
It is, I believe, procurement. It was not really advanced, was not really ahead of the curve into adoption of AI and digitalization. So we're catching up, which opens a lot of opportunities, right? And that's good. I believe people in procurement, also industries, they will get more and more used to have this AI technology on their side as one more of the team to leverage and use, right? So my vision is people will learn how to use this technology to work together with this technology to achieve more, right? That's a bit the vision for my team and for Danone, that we use technology to achieve more of what we're good at. Think of when you use RPA bots, so robotic process automation. What you're trying to do is build a little bot that does a lot of repetitive tasks, and it can easily be deployed to optimize and to improve the efficiency of certain processes, right? So these kind of components are becoming part of our teams that help us to achieve more with the teams we have. So this trend will continue, and we will include it in our toolkit.
So for a lot of years, people thought that AI was just all smoke and mirrors, and it wasn't real. And yet, how long have you been applying it to procurement?
Myself, a couple of years, and then what you've seen is there have been other applications, right? Like especially in the operational part, where you try to anticipate invoices that could get blocked, or automating processes around contract analytics, for instance. So we have a program around contract analytics where we use AI to understand the text in our legal contracts, right? And to make sense, okay, is this a good clause or not? Do we have some problems here or there? Because we have a big volume of contracts, right? So these are applications of AI that started elsewhere, right? We don't only have contracts in procurement, you have them also in sales or in M&As. And then that technology is there, then we can use it for procurement to analyze our procurement contracts. These are trends that have been already happening for a few years. But I think there are plenty of opportunities out there, and we're just at the beginning.
Well, that's why I'm excited about this AI council that we're doing with Zycus, and we're going to be creating test cases and where we can apply it within procurement, and then running these test cases in multiple companies and saying, can we get the technology to prove out that these are areas that AI can apply? And I think that is really needed for a lot of procurement executives, because they're not as forward thinking as you, a lot of them, or they believe in it, but they haven't seen it, and they need that proof of concept. So that's something that I'm really excited that we'll be able to go back to you and say, hey, have you tried this, and does it work? And then, apply those examples to other industries. So that's really exciting to me. So obviously you like technology, you're comfortable with it. So if you're going to think about the next few years of trends, where are you looking at technology? What's going to really drive your interest, do you think, within the procurement world?
I think we need to see a bit of, my personal view is that we need to see more consolidation of the technology landscape. If you look nowadays, what's out there in procurement, digital procurement, procurement analytics, software for procurement, there's a myriad of startups, scale-ups, some older players, but they have not achieved yet scale. They have not, you don't go and find 3-4 big dominant players that can offer also more an end-to-end view, right? So there's a lot of fragmentation where technology is good for direct materials, but it's not good for indirect services, right? Or one platform is only very good for operational activities in procurement, but not so good for the strategical activities, category strategies, negotiations, and such, right? And we need some more technology that is more end-to-end, that allows to, with one platform, to do a lot of the activities we have in procurement. If you want to equip now procurement, you need to go and find 20 different tools to cover the spectrum of activities we do. That fragmentation needs to be addressed, and I could expect some consolidation in the next years.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we've seen a lot of consolidation, yet every time I think that we've done the consolidation, you find new companies coming out with breakthrough ideas. So it's interesting that it's constantly evolving. So a question, do you use AI to look at your tail spend within Danone?
What we use analytics, I would not call AI, but
Okay.
we look at the data to try to understand where could we reduce tail, where we could consolidate some of the spend. With the spend analytics, try to turn on the light into tail spend to see where we need to tender part of that spend that hadn't been taken care of for a while. So it's more on the analytics than on AI per se.
Okay.
But it helps us to understand also where we need to focus, right?
Yeah, you know, what I worry about is that the tail spend is a lot of small contracts, a lot of small spend, but it exposes us to so much risk if we don't pay attention. Because if we're not paying attention to those providers, those suppliers, because the spend is so small, we could be introducing risk into our supply chains without even thinking about it, because it's not sexy. It's not fun to work on a $10,000 agreement or, you know, a one-off purchase. And so we don't pay attention to it. And so that's where I'm really wondering, do you think we can manage third-party risk a little bit better with the use of AI, looking across our spend profile? Is it something that can identify where a risk event might happen so we can mitigate it?
Yeah, I think you're into something there, Don. I see that. So my view on this is, if you need to do it manually to write a contract for small spend or keep an eye on that, it's a lot of effort, right? Now that is why technology can help, right? So if you digitalize source to pay process with the software, you can automate certain steps, or you can make some steps mandatory that could mitigate that risk, right? Now the next step is, after you have this software layer, to handle these processes efficiently on the tail with a small spend, with small suppliers, you start collecting the data. Then you can try to find more applications for AI to automate risk detection, predict risk, predict sustainability, liabilities, other types of risks. But first you need the digital software layer, right? So this kind of the evolution. You go do it manually, then you digitalize it, then you automate, you predict, you optimize. So I think where this is where the bigger players can have an impact by leveraging AI on top of their platforms, and because they have the view of what's happening, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I always tell people that, you know, smart people, which are the people we want to employ, don't want to do dumb, boring, repetitive work. And that's what the tail represents for most companies. You know, I've never, for all my years in procurement, I never had anyone raise their hand and say, oh, I want to look at the tail, give it to me. You know, it was always like, no, I'm really busy with something very strategic. I don't want to look at the tail. And yet now, with all of the risks that we're introducing, you know, whether it be sustainability, human trafficking, cybersecurity, there's so much risk that can take place in our tail that I really hope that we can be using automation and AI technologies to identify those risks.
Yes, of course, and of course, with the big suppliers, you already have a strategic partnership, right? So those you audit very well, and you have also the relationship that as soon as something happens, they're going to tell you, right? But it's with the smaller players that you don't have that relationship or that volume,
right?
With the bad things can happen. So yeah, there's a lot that will be happening in that space, and I'm really excited to see how we can enable people exactly to do what you say, right? Like people that really care about their work, they want to do better, and they know that they need to focus where they have the most impact, right? And in these high volume, low value activities, it's not that. They are in the, okay, we found the insight. Now, what do you need to do based on your expertise, right? That is where they can excel and where they also, can show their expertise, and they will draw their energy from.
Yeah. Well, Julio, thank you for your time today. It's so nice to talk to a data scientist who can actually converse in procurement language and get your point across. You did a great job today. So I really want to tell you thank you on behalf of everyone that's going to be listening or watching this podcast.
Thanks, Don, for having me for this great conversation. It's been a great time.
Well, it's not a surprise that Zycus has you as part of their world, because I am so impressed with what they're doing. So, folks, let me tell you a little bit about the AI Council that we have now formed in conjunction with Zycus. And this is going to be an ideal platform where we're going to get together and ideate and then incubate your organization's AI journey with the best minds in the industry collaborating and providing insights. We have world-class organizations who've already signed up. You don't have to be a Zycus client or customer. You only have to have a passion to learn more about AI. And we're going to be going through a number of business cases and proof of concepts for, can it apply here in procurement? Can it apply here? So it's a journey that we're hoping that sourcing and procurement leaders will come together to solve problems and extract the true value and understand what AI can do for your organization. So if you're interested, please reach out to us or to Zycus. But the council is going to organize around various activities, including workshops and forums, to enable member organizations to initiate their AI journey or to further their AI journey if they're already on it today. We're going to be using a sandbox and pilot projects using Merlin AI. And we really hope that all of you will join us. So if you have an interest in joining us for the AI Council, reach out. And then, folks, I know you liked this podcast, so make sure that you share it among your organization and the rest of your peers. And then please join us for our podcast series again very soon. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Want to nominate someone for an interview? Email us at info@sig.org.